I'd like to thank Senator Eric Brakey for inviting me to speak at this great event. My talk is on the global censorship complex and the local voice of liberty. And I'm going to do my talk in three parts. The first part, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to give a narrative of how and why human beings value free speech so much and why the state hates it. Part two, I'm going to give a frame of reference on how we can look at our national government as an empire and lay out the contours of its global censorship complex. And then in part three, I'm going to talk about what is to be done, which is the resistance from the local voice of liberty, which is all of us. So, part one, how and why human beings love and value free speech so much. The primatologist Richard Wrangham has observed that human beings are really interesting because we're capable of being very tolerant, very peaceful, very cooperative, but we're also capable of extreme cruelty and violence. And the way that he frames it is he says, we are, as a species, downgraded for reactive aggression, but we're upgraded for proactive aggression. So we're really good at keeping our cool, more being provoked, downgraded for reactive aggression. But we're also really good at hunting, proactive aggression. And he wondered, well, why is that? And he looked at chimpanzees, which are kind of a cousin species to humans. In evolutionary theory, humans and chimpanzees have a common ancestor approximately 8 million years ago. When you look at chimpanzees, they are very high in reactive aggression. They fight all the time. They're also pretty high in proactive aggression. And they have alpha males. Now, when people talk about alpha males in common parlance, they usually mean guys like Joe Rogan and Jocko Willink, but that's not really what an alpha male is. Those guys are just like natural elites or leaders, people that other people look up to. In a chimpanzee troop, an alpha male is the adult male that physically dominates every single member of the troop. And we don't have that. Why don't we have that? Well, Wrangham's hypothesis is that's because of language. Our species acquired language, which chimpanzees don't have. And so the beta males were able to talk to each other and to tell each other stories like, hey, you know what the alpha male did to me yesterday? Oh, you know what he did to me last week? And they were able to conspire. And then they would kill the alpha male. So over 100,000, 200,000 years of alpha males being killed off and the most aggressive members of the species being killed off by the betas, there is an evolutionary pressure to make humans less reactive aggressive and more proactive aggressive, especially in coalitions. So you have this what becomes what the kids call the patriarchy, male coalitional, proactive, lethal aggression, which in the case of humans can be hyper-selective. Chimpanzees can go and kill a chimp from another troop, but humans can go and get Joey, go get that guy. So this becomes the basis of what we can think of as the patriarchy. Wrangham refers to it as the tyranny of the cousins. And it's what makes civilization possible, but it's also what makes the state possible. Now, the state is kind of in the position of the original alpha, where the state wants to aggress against every single member of the society. So you can imagine that if the alpha chimp was capable of speech controls, and he would have done that, because once the betas can talk to each other, they can threaten his oppression of them. And so that's why we, as humans, as one perspective, value free speech so much, and why the state hates it. Because when the people, all the people, are able to talk to each other and share ideas and uncover the state's malfeasance, it threatens their power. Okay, for the second part of my speech, I'm going to talk about how our national government is an empire, and it's running a global censorship complex. There's a debate about whether the United States is an empire, and I'd like to do a little thought experiment. Imagine that our central government in DC shut down every single foreign military base and spy installation, brought home all of our troops and spies and contractors, withdrew from every military alliance, every economic alliance, freed all the territories, so Puerto Rico is now its own sovereign nation state, sold Alaska back to Russia, and gave Hawaii back to the indigenous royal family that used to run it. So now the United States is just the 48 contiguous states, or CONUS, as the Pentagon calls it. If that happened, my contention is the United States would still be an empire, because you'd have this one city, Washington, D.C., ruling over a vast geographical area, bigger than the Roman Empire at its height, with over 300 million people in an ethnically and culturally diverse society who are forced to pay tribute to it. Some of the apologists of empire who say that we're not an empire will say, you know, we don't demand tribute from other countries, which that's not true, but we definitely demand tribute, or the government demands tribute from the domestic population. And as my colleague at the Libertarian Institute, Keith Knight, likes to say, the domestic population are the people the government is at war with, but who have given up. So we have states naturally antagonistic to free speech, and then we have our national government, which is the most powerful state in the history of the world, running an empire. So of course, it's extremely antagonistic to free speech. And just to lay out the brief contours of the global censorship complex, in late 2022, Elon Musk purchased Twitter. And then in early 2023, he took a bunch of internal documents and company communications. He made them available to several reporters, the most important of which being Matt Taibbi. And through Taibbi's work and the other journalists' work, this picture of a mass censorship regime emerged. And just to emphasize one part of it, any federal agency that wanted to make a censorship request of Twitter or any other social media or tech company would submit its request to the FBI, and then the FBI would liaison with Twitter and the other companies to say, hey, ban this person or limit this person's reach. Visibility filtering is what they call it. Any state government or state agency that wanted to make that type of request of Twitter would submit its request to the Federal Department of Homeland Security, and that agency would liaison with the social media companies. So you see right there, America kind of operating structurally in a way that's similar to the Holy Roman Empire, where you have the emperor, which is the president and the federal imperial bureaucracy, and then the kings, which we just call the state governors. And as you could expect, this censorship doesn't just stop within America, it's global. Our law enforcement and intelligence and diplomatic agencies pressure foreign governments to directly censor American citizens and anyone around the world, and they also lean on federal governments to come down on the social media companies in ways that would be, the optics would be bad if our government was doing it. So one example of that the journalist Glenn Greenwald has reported a lot on is there's a judge in Brazil who's basically been made a king. And he has like basically absolute power to censor the internet. At one point, he banned Twitter. And he also, just of his own stroke of a pen, made it illegal for anyone in Brazil to use a virtual private network to access Twitter with the threat of like 5 or 10 years of imprisonment. And those kind of stories are all over the world where the US state has its spheres of influence. And you can see that the empire, which is ad hoc and is often doesn't even really know what it's doing, is always committed to crushing free speech because it's always a threat to its continued growth and its continued accumulation of power. So what is to be done? Well, you guys are the resistance. You guys are the local voice of liberty. And there's a reason that free speech is part of the First Amendment. As the great Matthew Ho has put it, free speech is our preeminent right. And as the comedian Dave Chappelle put it, there's a reason that the Second Amendment comes right after that. That's in case the First Amendment doesn't work out. So I'd like to suggest that we think about our freedom of speech in a similar way that we think of our right to bear arms. It's viewed by the people who founded this country as a natural right given to us by nature and or God. It's not something that the state grants us. And there's a tendency for the state to kind of portray itself as like the parents, but really, the state's like a little kid. And it's like, no, Billy, you can't get in the way of people's free speech. It's like, oh, but like, what if they say something that's not true? Like, no, Billy, but what if they say something that's true, but it's like harmful to my agenda? Like, no, like, what if they're not a citizen? No, you can't infringe on anyone's freedom of speech anywhere in the world because they're human and you're the state. So I would suggest that we think of that First Amendment right in connection with the Second Amendment right and realize that it needs to be used responsibly. And I know it's fun to be spicy on the social media. I'm not saying don't do that, but definitely think about what we're trying to accomplish when we interact with other people online and also in real life. And I think we should keep this one thing in mind. A few years back, I got to attend Pork Fest up here in New Hampshire for the first time. Hell yeah, Pork Fest! And I got to meet Tom Woods, Bob Murphy, and the great Scott Horton. That's how I started writing for the Libertarian Institute. So I'm hanging out there one night, and for anyone who doesn't know, it takes place at a campground, and there's all these people who are there to attend this libertarian festival, but there's also people who are just there camping. And one of those people had their car keyed, so they called the police. So the police show up. And the guys I'm hanging out with were like, there's an employee of the police on site. And they kept saying that. They kept saying, there's an employee of the police here. And I was like, you mean a police officer? And it was like jarring to me. Why are they talking like that? So I had that in mind for a few weeks. And then I came to this realization that that's a really profound thing that they're saying. They're making this distinction between this structural agency, your local police department, and this human being who is employed by that police department. And so when I got into the work of the great American philosopher, Kendi Hess, talking about corporate agency, my mind came back to the idea of the employee of the police. And Kendi Hess she got her law degree at Harvard, and she's taught for many years at the College of the Holy Cross. And I believe she's currently a visiting professor at Oxford University. So she is Douglas Murray approved. And she says that a corporate agent is a material object comprised of the people that work for it that has its own rational point of view. And it is able to exist when the people who work for it have effectively submitted themselves to the rational point of view of that corporate agent. So the simplest way to think about it is when they do their job. So that employee of the police showed up to take a police report for the insurance company or whatever. He's doing his job. Now, he's primarily, though, he's a human being. So the kind of ironic thing is that the state itself is not really him. He's making it possible by submitting himself to his job, but the state is bigger than him. We could think of the state as like this non-conscious vampire, which is a threat to him. And when you look at the history of totalitarian societies, like the Soviet Union, one of the worst jobs you can have is working for the secret police, because the secret police will kill the secret police really quick. So what I'm suggesting to all of us is that try to connect to the humanity of all of our fellow citizens, even those who work for the state. And New Hampshire has done a really great job of getting principled people elected, such as Senator Eric Brakey. So keep doing that, keep staying politically involved, but also when you're talking about free speech, just get that into the narrative that, like, if the state becomes more powerful, if it can kill or completely restrict our free speech, that's going to be a nightmare for everyone, even like the one guy who's like at the top and thinks he's invincible. So, in conclusion, please, if you will, follow me on X at WeeksJF. I'm trying to get up to 500 followers, and I feel like I'm being visibility filtered. Thank you so much, guys.